Welcome to Back and Brew, an intentional conversation on all things spine while we sip a brew of the guest's choice, be it beer, whiskey, coffee, tea, whatever it is. We're here for the conversation. Today's guest is Dr. Brent Kimball. I'm so excited to have him on. He is one of the most innovative, boundary-pushing, best surgeons I've ever seen. I worked very closely with him. I was his rep. He was one of the first surgeons to give me a chance. His story has always fascinated me and anyone that has heard it. Everywhere from him having quadruplets during residency when he's working almost 120 hours a week, all the way to the innovative surgical solutions that he offers to his patients that are really starting to transform the space of spine surgery. I cannot wait for you to hear his story. This is Back and Brew. So, man, thanks for coming on the show. Pumped to have you on Back and Brew, the inaugural first episode.
Yep.
We obviously see each other probably more than we see our families.
Probably.
So for the audience, I should say, go ahead and introduce yourself. Like, what do you do, who you are, where you live?
Okay. My name is Brent Kimball. I'm a neurosurgeon. I practice spine surgery, orthopedic fellowship trained in spine surgery as well. I'm practiced in Denver, Colorado. I've been here for about almost 11 years and specialize in artificial disc replacement.
Awesome. So as always with the way that our name is, it's Back and Brews, right? So we're going to have a conversation around all things spine while we're drinking some type of brew. This one I always have the guest bring it from a certain area.
That's right.
This one is, it's the root beer by Rocky Mountain Soda Company.
All right. Which one do you have?
I have root beer. I didn't get the other one. They have a bunch of flavors, but I have root beer. You do too, I think. And tell me a little bit about it. What's interesting about it? It's from the state you operate in.
Well, I'm glad that it's from Colorado. It's got some memorable aftertaste to it. It's not as sugary as the typical root beers out there. I like it.
All right. Yeah, I just doing a little bit of research. I saw that it has like only 4 ingredients, which is interesting. No dyes, 4 ingredients. I'm like, that makes sense why it would be kind of the Colorado theme of like
organic.
Yeah. I think they said have vegan sugar, which I don't know what the difference between. I mean, does the like
it's cane sugar? I don't know if
vegan cane sugar. That was what they.
It's like yeah.
But I've had some of their other ones. I liked all their other ones. Their cream soda was really good, but I thought the same thing. Like, it's not sweet, pretty good stuff. But that's kind of the drink for this episode.
Great.
So go and tell me where are you originally from? Because you're not a Colorado native.
Okay, yeah, I'm not. So I married someone. My wife's from Colorado. I brought her back here though. So I'm actually from Santa Barbara, California.
Yeah.
I come from a family of surgeons. To be fair, my dad's an orthopedist. I've got 3 brothers that are orthopedists. One of them practices spine. I'm the only neurosurgeon. So medicine and surgery is pretty heavy in my family. I've never practiced in California, but I've got a brother out there. I've got a brother in Utah that's practicing. I've got a brother in Philadelphia that's practicing. And I've also practiced in Australia where I did my fellowship. So, I've got a little bit of perspective.
You have, how many brothers and sisters do you have total?
4 brothers, 5 sisters.
All right, so you're
1 of 10.
1 of 10.
Yep.
And a significant amount of them are surgeons or in healthcare.
For better or for worse.
I was going to say, like,
yeah, I don't know
it's
if
usually
it's
how
a
it
good
goes.
thing.
That's usually kind of somewhat how it goes, but not to that extent, I guess. So growing up, you said your dad is a surgeon. You grew up in Santa Barbara. Kind of tell me about that. What was it like seeing him as a surgeon then in the 1960s? Is that when it was?
Oh, I'm not that old.
I'm just kidding.
So that would have been the 80s.
No.
Yeah, everyone wants to be from the 80s now. So, he's a worker bee, hard worker. He left to work before I woke up. He came home after work, usually after I went to bed. He worked a lot, and we had a lot of kids, and Santa Barbara wasn't cheap, and so he put us through school and took good care of us financially, and but he worked a lot, and I think that's not just typical of him, but also typical of where surgery was and the expectations of surgeons at that time. Things are kind of changing, but.
And you thought, okay, this guy, my dad works hard, but he works from literally like dawn to dusk.
Yeah,
I want to do that.
Oh man, I don't know that I was thinking that that's what I wanted to do. I knew he worked with his hands, and he was very satisfied with it and providing a lot of value to people. And I think that's kind of what I started with, is that I wanted to work with my hands. I enjoyed the surgical part of medicine, the technical part of medicine and surgery. I always knew I wanted to be a surgeon, but neurosurgery just kind of evolved as I got into med school. So,
all right. So tell me about where'd you go to med school?
So I went to Columbia College of Physicians and Surgeons in New York, and they have a super strong neurosurgery program there. I wasn't originally interested in neurosurgery, but I spent a week on the service and just felt like it was my calling. That's what I had to do, and so I made a big shift. Originally, I was interested in plastics, reconstructive, but that was kind of the age of Dr. 90210, and I honestly, my wife was like, "You are not that kind of person," and I couldn't see myself selling myself every day. I think that's just inherent to that field. And I did a surgery with, or I didn't do, but I watched a surgery with plastics and neurosurgery, and they were, collaborating, and I was more interested in the neurosurgical piece. And so that kind of prompted my interest. And then it just felt right. So I just made this big shift and haven't ever looked back. So
you mentioned before too, I think one time that like while you were in your training, coincidentally, you saw someone that like passed out or had a seizure or something. And that was like a part in the middle of kind of that evolution or that realization that you're like, hey, this is really interesting.
Yeah. If you've ever lived in New York, Columbia's on the Upper West Side. I was walking down from 181st to 168th, and there was a guy having a seizure on the ground. And I, like 2 days before, I had done, my ACLS training, chest compressions and, mouth to mouth. And so I had basically just barely learned this. And there's this guy seizing.
So you're about lifeguard level of.
Yeah, like I had the short white coat, but didn't really know what I was doing. And so there's this guy seizing on the ground. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. Am I supposed to give him chest compressions or, trying to figure it out. And so anyway, he ended up arresting and we resuscitated him. Another doctor came and helped me, and that was pretty intense. And then ultimately he had like a metastasis to his brain, and I got to go see his brain surgery. And so that kind of got me also interested in neurosurgery.
That's wild.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy.
So to go from California to New York, then what was the next stop?
So Memphis. So I did my neurosurgery training in Memphis at the Semmes Murphy Clinic, and that's really where I fell in love with spine surgery.
Interesting. What was the fellowship?
So I kind of did. I got really interested in spinal oncology in residency, and I found a mentor in New York City, Mark Bilski. He's an amazing surgeon, and he was, in my opinion, at the forefront of spine tumor metastatic spine surgery. And so I went out and spent 3 to 4 months with him. I think we did like 150 cases or something like that in a short period of time. And that was amazing. So I did that. It was kind of like a mini fellowship in spinal oncology. He taught me a ton, integrating that with radiation oncology. And then after that, I also sorted out an orthopedic spine fellowship in Australia. My wife and I wanted to get out of the country. I wanted another experience. And, I knew there was something in orthopedics that was going to give me more rounding. I mean, finishing neurosurgery training, especially out of Memphis, we got so much spine surgery training in residency that it was almost kind of laughable to go do a spine fellowship, because we were, maybe I did 3,000 spine cases in residency or something like that. And we just felt very, very proficient compared to a lot of the other programs, and we're getting a lot of autonomy. And so I never thought I would do that, but honestly, that orthopedic experience was one of the most beneficial things in my whole career. So I went to Australia. Not only did I get to see orthopedics, we did scoli, pediatrics, but they were doing things in Australia, artificial disc in the neck and the back. And it was like my whole brain like exploded because I'd watched Dr. Foley in Memphis do a handful of artificial discs, but it was really, you know, there wasn't a lot of data. There wasn't a lot of people bought into it. And in Australia, they were doing these hybrids, multi-level, 2, 3, 4 levels. They had people that had, you know, a 2-level arthroplasty 20 years ago, and then we're coming back, and now we're doing, you know, they'd had 4-5-5-1, and now they're 65 or 70, and they were going to do 2, 3, 3, 4. And these are like people that are Medicare population, and it was just like, wow, how can you even do this? But they were doing it. These people were doing amazing. And not only that, the surgeons were doing their own exposures, and so it was just like a whole new world. They weren't doing as much in the cervical, interestingly, but lumbar, which is, in my opinion, way more complex, they were just doing a ton. And so I was fascinated by that. It really turned my perspective, which was very, very TLIF, because that, you know, the TLIF was kind of born in Memphis by Kevin Foley. And, you know, this was just a whole new world for me. And I made me fall in love with anterior reconstruction, made me fall in love with motion preservation, and just a whole new world of trying to fix the spine without actually operating through the back.
Man, I'm sure that's a rare glimpse that like most people don't get. I mean, it's funny to see because like we work with, obviously I'm a rep, and that's how we met each other, was me being a spine rep for you. But with a lot of the other surgeons we see, there's a lot of times where surgeons kind of get stuck in their own little world of where they train and what they learn, and it's very regional, it seems like. I mean,
Absolutely.
Like in Memphis, when you were training there, were there very many people doing anterior at all, ALIF, anything like that?
I mean, again, I probably saw less than 10 in my whole residency. And at that time, which was in, you know, 2000, you know, I trained there 2007 to 2013, lateral was really just getting hot. And so I was pushing as hard as I could to do as much lateral and NuVasive, and, you know, Medtronic had their D-Lift, but that was really the only two players in the market. And NuVasive was, you know, kind of had the best stuff. And so we always just wanted to use NuVasive, and they had the better cages and expandable and all this really cool stuff, big end plates. And so that was, I probably put more emphasis on that at that time. There wasn't a lot of options for cervical replacement, and the whole insurance environment for artificial disc was not supportive really of that space either. So it was fusions, ACDFs, TLIFs, and, you know, multi-level posterior constructs mostly.
It has to be interesting to think of like the patient population you saw in Memphis compared to Lone Tree, Colorado, where you operate now. What were some of like what was the typical, let's say, because you were probably taking a ton of trauma call or something like that. Like what would that look like relative to your Skyridge trauma call now?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, Memphis, you know, they've got a regional med center there that has got high level 1 trauma and getting stuff from all over the place. So complex spine trauma it's a volume play there. I mean, they're just plowing through just tons and tons of spine fractures. We don't see that kind of volume here, and the mechanism of injury is not as severe here. So we definitely have a different population here. It's more healthy. They're more educated. And it's not as, you know, it's a private hospital too. So there's just a different population that ends up there, for better, for worse.
Yeah. So kind of talk to me about like now your practice. What does your practice look like? Has it had to evolve with any kind of changes in the industry of healthcare at all? As far as like changes in Medicare reimbursement, changes in insurance approvals.
I mean, it's always changing. I mean, Medicare keeps getting cut and cut all the time. I mean, a couple of years ago, you know, we had like a 10% cut. That's unheard of, as inflation's going, you know, 4 or 5% a year. And then, you know, you're cutting Medicare reimbursement to physicians or surgeons by 10%, and then subsequently dropping it again and again. It's complicated. So, you know, physician practice is typically subsidizing their, you know, volume with commercial payers and then Medicare, but it's complicated because the commercial payers benchmark off of Medicare, and they keep changing their benchmarks. And if Medicare's the the bottom, then it's kind of like a race to the bottom. And then we also had the No Surprises Act that kind of came out a couple of years ago, and that had a lot of unintended consequences where it kind of pulled down the reimbursement rate and reduced surgeons or physicians' abilities to negotiate with payers. Honestly, right now, payers just have the upper hand because they are, they're in a different game than we are. The surgeons are just here to provide the care, but we're at their mercy whether or not they want to pay us or not. We get authorizations for surgeries, but it doesn't mean we're going to get paid, which it's ridiculous. Medicine's ridiculous that way. I could talk about this forever. It's a joke. The business of healthcare it's tragic.
What is so how is that like? Do you remember your dad talking about any of this? Like, what is his perspective? I mean, is he still?
He lived in the golden age of medicine. He's retired now, but the reality is, what he always told me is, listen, if you go into healthcare, you will always have a job, and he's right. You will always be well paid, and he's right. No one's crying for me. I work really, really hard, and I studied and spent a lot of time to try to get these skills and to be able to do it safely and well, but it's the comparison that gets you into trouble. If you're like, oh, well, 20 years ago, what were people getting reimbursed for this, and how did that, how does that compare to today? Our skill set's been devalued, and that's only reason it has is because health insurance companies have devalued us, and they've done that, and now they're doing it more and more through, complex batch denials, artificial intelligence. It's a game that the surgeon can't really win. And so it's bizarre because, health insurance consumers, you and I, when we're on a health insurance plan, we're actually paying for the plan, but then it's my responsibility as a healthcare provider to make sure that I'm getting paid from your plan. There's no other real industry that works like healthcare does, where I take the risk, I take the responsibility of doing the work, and then maybe your insurance company pays me, maybe they don't. But that's acceptable behavior in healthcare, and I think that's going to change. It's got to change, especially with all the reimbursements coming down.
What have you done to offset it? To try to, it's not even offset. It's honestly to slow the decline.
Well, we're thinking about that stuff every single day. If you notice these declines, which everyone is noticing and appreciates that, you can reduce expenses, you can increase your volume. Those are the first two things you do, but you'll quickly realize that you can only trim so much fat and you can only work so many hours before it's not sustainable. And so looking for more creative ways to participate in the healthcare financial system is, that's what we're always looking for the right way to do it. We just want to be able to work, provide high quality care, and not be forced to do an unrealistic amount of surgery to get compensated appropriately. I have a neighbor he works for Southwest, and he's a pilot, and they have severe restrictions on how many hours they can fly before they can't fly, right? Makes sense, right?
Yeah,
you don't want to get on a hot dog with 150 people on it flying 30,000 feet in the air if your pilot's been awake for more than, I don't know what it is, 18 hours? I don't even know. But I can promise you that there's a lot of surgeons out there that are doing a lot more than that, and they may be operating on your brain or your spine or who knows what. There's no restrictions in healthcare like that. It's kind of scary, actually. So it's left up to the doctor, and hospitals, they just want the surgeons to keep operating because we generate revenue for the hospitals. Implant companies want us using the implants because that's how they make their money. Insurance companies, well, they'd prefer we never do surgery so nobody ever got care, so they didn't have to pay for it. But they're happy for us to do the surgery and then not pay us. So that happens too. But there's no one really restricting, how many hours you get to work or whatnot. It's bizarre.
What is the what role, you kind of briefly mentioned the hospitals. How do the hospitals play into this whole like system? Like, are they, I mean, inevitably there's not too many black and white, but like, I would say overall, you can kind of say good guys, bad guys, insurance, kind of bad guys, but you still need them.
I mean, patients need them.
Yeah.
We have to play with insurance companies because that's the accepted way to interact with, the healthcare financial system, but it's messed up.
Yeah. Where do the hospitals come into that whole?
I mean, they're another big player, and but they're looking out for themselves, and most of them are for-profit entities. Some of them are not, but even the ones that are non-for-profit are still very profitable, and they're looking for ways to fill their operating rooms and fill their emergency rooms and drive trauma traffic to the hospitals so that they can increase their volume and elevate their level of, care. It's just it's a weird game because, for example, in Denver, we might only, like, some states have an area of need qualification where the state or whatever agency will only allow a certain number of hospitals or a certain number of certain level of care hospitals into their area. But I don't think we have that issue in Colorado. So what you end up with is these very high level hospitals, which means that they're either level 1 or level 2. And the higher the level of the hospital, that it opens them up to additional areas of compensation, even if they don't necessarily or can barely support that volume. That's kind of odd. And so they're playing a game too to maximize their reimbursement. They've got shareholders. And even if the state or the city doesn't need that many hospitals, then that's what we end up with. And they're competing with each other for volume, a limited amount of volume. And they're looking for ways to maximize billing, just like everyone is. I mean, increasing the complexity of a patient in the hospital. We get queries all the time through the EMR, and you can tell when they, hey, was this an infection? Somebody is on the backside of the billing of that account trying to increase the complexity of the case so that the hospital can submit a higher bill for that case. It's just everyone is trying to increase the complexity, increase the validation for their billing. But then on the other side of it, United Healthcare, Blue Cross Blue Shield, whoever, they may not pay anyways. And the little guys, the providers, we're the ones that suffer the most because we have less resources. We have less recourse.
Yeah. Because you kind of wait, you have to do the surgery and then hope.
Yeah, it's a hope and a prayer, but I mean, fortunately, we still get paid, but we don't get paid what we're contracted to, and it's a very convoluted system. So because the time to getting paid is so far away from the actual service being rendered, it's very, very difficult to connect the two sometimes. And for example, in spine surgery, you might have, let's say, 8 codes on a surgery. There's a chance you could get paid on 4 of those codes, okay, within, let's say, 3 months. And then the other 4, let's say, are denied, and then you appeal those, and then one of those codes gets paid 2 months later, and then another 2 codes or 1 code gets paid 6 months later. So now you've got this trailing just disaster. Okay, well, that sounds like no big deal, right? But what if you do 400 or 500 cases in a year, and let's say you operate for 5 years. Now you've got 2,500 cases, and now you're stringing this out over this massive amount of time. It's this massive headache. Billing and collection is just super complicated to manage it. It's a disaster.
So you have a contracted rate with the insurance. You were saying, like, if I'm going to do, let's make it super simple. Like, I'm going to do, Operation A, then I'm contracted with Cigna or United Healthcare to get paid whatever, X amount of dollars. Mm-hmm. You do the surgery, you bill the insurance, and there's a chance you're not going to get that
Absolutely.
X amount of dollars.
I looked over some of my billing reports the other day. Emergency brain tumor surgery, like 2 years ago, 0. Even on some federal plans, some Medicare cases, Medicaid cases, United Health, all the commercial payers, sometimes they just find a reason, find a way not to pay. Now, I mean, great, we know that's going to happen on times, but there's a lot of risk. That doesn't mean that I'm not still at risk for, I take care of that patient for months, maybe years after that. I assume a lot of risk in going through the surgery. I pay for tens of thousands of dollars a year in medical malpractice insurance, time away, middle of the night surgery. I mean, all these things add up, and there's no other industry where you'd get paid a massive premium to do that. Let's say your basement floods in the middle of the night.
Yeah, that was day after Christmas for me.
Yeah, they probably forked out a lot of money to get it fixed the next day or something.
We had them come that night and they fixed
Sure.
it. And funny thing is, like, I signed on the dotted line of what I was going to pay for, and they expected me to pay it within a week.
Yeah.
So like, that's insane.
So I don't know. No one's going to be crying for me as a neurosurgeon. I compensated well, but we have to fight tooth and nail for everything. And right now the odds are stacked against us. That's what I would say.
What do your kids think of healthcare? You have 6 kids.
They think I work too much. They say I don't want to work as much as Dad works.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't want them to work as much as I work.
Yeah,
Part of that's me, but we all have our own stresses and anxieties, and maybe some of those are some of mine.
Yeah. And when did you have the quadruplets?
Okay, yeah. So I got quadruplets. I had those. Well, I didn't have them. My wife had them. We had them.
That was a trap.
At the end, yeah. We had them at the end of med school, right before I started neurosurgery residency.
Oh, so you had them at a good time where you wouldn't be
Perfect.
so busy.
There was not a lot going on. I was super available. Not at all. Yeah, I was basically drowning in neurosurgery. My wife was trying to feed 4 babies bottles at the same time, and no help. So I would come home, after this is when there were no work hour restrictions, and we were working
for residents.
Yeah, we were. This is hard to believe, but there were weeks we would work 120-hour weeks awake. It's like, do you even know how many hours are there in a week? It's crazy.
That's brutal.
Yeah. So that was, honestly, going through that is traumatic. Residency I had a great residency, and I loved the people that I worked with, but the amount, it reset to me like a normal of just how much you could do and put your body and brain and, how much energy you could put into something that was unrealistic and unhealthy.
Yeah.
And I think it was probably, although it helped me get to where I am, it's probably the most unhealthy thing I've done in my entire life.
Like, if you survive that, everything else is not as bad.
You can't. I just don't think you can recover from it because, no matter what, you're like, oh, I survived that, and so then somewhat accept that as like that there's some normalcy to it, which there is not. That's not normal. That's not normal behavior. That's not normal to expect that of yourself or other people, to be, spend that much dedicated time, basically abandoning my wife and my kids during that time. That's a recipe for disaster. And so, that's been a tough part about the career, period.
Yeah. No, it's got to feel like it's not like just going, to a job where what you do doesn't affect a human necessarily, right? Like if someone's stocking the shelves at King Soopers, they're going to be stocking the shelves late at night, and they're like, oh yeah, it sucks, I'm going to be working late at night. But when they go home, they're off. There's no there's no guilt for not doing something. Yeah. Whereas that seems like that'd be tough to get past in your mind at a certain point of leaving undone things undone at work to go home and have a real life.
Yeah. Some people do it better than others. I don't think I'd carry it home with me so much, but I think the fact that you are to some degree always available, have to always be available, because there are certain things you cannot transfer to somebody else. And when there's a problem with the patient, and that's inherent to neurosurgery, especially brain surgery, and even a lot of spine surgery is when there's a problem, it's usually pretty urgent, and you can't be like, oh, someone else will take care of it. There's nobody else to take care of it. And it's not fair to ask somebody to take care of it, and you kind of take the responsibility and you just do it. And so you always have to somewhat be able to play in this game, to do. It's just a huge cost.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy to think, because like as a rep, we'll be in there and like, to not sound terrible, but we forget about the human side of it.
Yeah.
Like by the time we go in there, usually they're draped, the patient's draped, and what you see is not a person. You see like a
patch of skin.
Yeah, a patch of skin that's going to be opened. Hardware's going to go in, and then as it's being closed, we're gone. Like that's usually what it is. And so it's hard to like think about. Like if we ever are talking about a specific patient, we're not talking about him by name. We're talking about, oh yeah, that T-lift.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that two-level A-lift. Oh yeah, that disc replacement.
Yeah.
There are very few instances where we have a name to it.
All right. So tell me, we talked about the surgeon side, where did you start? How did you get into, medical device?
It was interesting. Like I've always had kind of the competitive background. I mean, I fought MMA during college and thought I was going to be a doctor, and went to school, did all my pre-med requirements, and eventually a surgeon that I was shadowing was actually the person that was like, I don't know how to get into this right now. I'm not sure I'd get into this.
So what was it? What was it that he said that turned you off?
Compensation's going down, effort's going up. You're going to get paid less and expected to do more.
Yeah.
And your life is on pause for a long period of time. And kind of that seems like that's the failure in our education system, is that at least when I went to college was you can be a doctor, lawyer, or engineer. Mm-hmm. Other than that, you're broke. And like being raised in like, rural Western Colorado and like kind of looking over the fence at the kids that might've had more or were raised maybe a little more wealthy, is like, well, I can tell you one thing. The most uncomfortable thing for me is broke. I don't want to be that. I've been that before. And so like, I eventually I got my degrees. I have a degree in English, Spanish, and finished my requirements to go to med school. And then a family friend was in medical device sales. And they were like selling for like Cardinal or McKesson, actually, I think.
Okay.
And so they were selling like soft goods to whatever, but they were kind of high up there. He's like, you might want to try this. You have an okay personality. Maybe you want to try that. Okay. And I'm like,
you're like,
okay, thanks, man. That's great. That's a start.
It's good enough for me.
So I went to, I started researching it, and I'm like, one of the guys that was taking one of my jiu-jitsu classes on the weekends I would teach was like, yeah, he worked for Steris. His name's Jeff, awesome dude. And he was like, yeah, let me give you some pointers. And he's like, you got to get sales experience first. So I did. I got business to business sales experience doing selling credit repair to people. So I'd get them to enroll in a program, a monthly program where the company I worked for would fix their credit so they could get approved for a home loan. I did that for about 11 months, and that was my territory was in Boston or the Northeast, and I'd fly every other week from Denver to Boston and do that. Then I got a job in med device in Texas, selling like little test strips for some different diseases. But the goal was to get into the OR because I knew the money was in implants in sales in the operating room. So then I went into St. Jude Medical. I got a job with them, selling spinal cord stimulators as a junior rep, as an associate. So I was basically the guy that would have to run around and do stuff that
How old are you then?
At that point, I was 20. I was probably 26, 27 at that point.
Okay.
Yeah. It was great time, fantastic time. Like, it's funny, like every associate complains, like any of the junior reps in the industry will complain about being junior reps, and they're always like, I want a territory.
Yeah.
Until they realize what it is to get a territory.
More responsibility.
Like, more responsibility. If you don't sell anything that month, you don't get paid that month. Like, pretty simple. Or I should say, you don't get paid the next month because it's usually in arrears.
So you got into spinal stim, became a territory manager. What happened?
I was actually moved to Nashville, became a territory manager. Didn't really like living in the South. It just wasn't mine. I was born and raised in Colorado. I'm used to a lot of outdoors, I'm used to fall, cold weather.
So how'd you end up from St. Jude to what you're doing now? And what is your role now, and who do you work for?
So I own a distributorship, Alliance Medical, and the way I got to that was I first got experience in spine because it's a spine distributorship. So I went from St. Jude Medical, moved back to quit there because I didn't want to live in Nashville anymore, and so I moved back to Colorado and took a job with NuVasive, where I was a junior rep in Colorado Springs under Brad Varing. Awesome rep, like that guy he's just built differently. It's like the wrestlers. Like the wrestlers are always a little off, but they're the best workers. Like they will outwork you. They're a little off, but they will outwork you. That guy he won silver one year in the Olympics in wrestling.
Did you ever wrestle him or do jiu-jitsu against his wrestling?
He was already retired at that point, so he was out.
Okay.
But then I ultimately got promoted to being a rep, a full scale rep in South Denver, where I met you. Had like no business, rolled in just bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, ready to change the world with selling better implants, right?
Yeah.
That was the whole idea. Oh, these implants are better. At the time, NuVasive stuff was legitimately better.
Yeah.
You know, at that point, there were really only like 5 companies.
Medtronic, NuVasive, maybe Globus.
Yeah, Medtronic, even Globus then didn't have a really full bag.
Yeah.
Stryker. And so then I was like tasked with trying to get in front of these surgeons with a better product. But I was still losing.
Yeah. But you're still selling their product.
Yeah, I was still selling their product, but not at the rate that would be a life-sustaining amount.
Yeah. Okay.
Eventually stuck it through and built it up to enough to where I could, and honestly, the relationships, like that's what these big companies, the value in working for these big companies is not what the money you're going to make initially. It is the relationships it's going to allow you to build. So they may give you a salary or something like that, but it gives you enough time to learn the product, get trained on how to run a spine case, and then ultimately, I think I met you because of XLIF. Like you might have done, you didn't do that much XLIF back then still.
Yeah.
It was like maybe 1 or 2 a month, and we'd get the interbody. And so from there, just kind of always had sets up and always was just like banking on someone else messing up that I could swoop in. And I'm like, oh man, I know I hope someone doesn't have a setup.
Someone's going to drop the ball.
Yeah. Yeah. And then just eventually kind of moved in and got more and more of your business, more of few other people's business, and eventually got enough business to where I felt like I kind of looked around at other smaller companies. And you were actually the one that kind of talked to me about it. You're like, man, I use there's a lot of these like niche products that I'd be really interested in picking up or being able to use, but I want to be able to call one rep.
Yeah.
And you were kind of a big part of why I was able to move off, because you're like, I knew that if I went to be a distributor from W-2, like, yes, W-2 was comfortable, but it was kind of a comfortable death. The price of the implants goes down every year.
Yeah.
Your quota goes up every year. And sets are going to be more constrained every year.
Yeah, I think that's something that I've learned from you is that the set availability and your ability to actually provide reliable support to the surgeon it's a complicated formula. Like choosing the company that's going to provide you the sets, access to the sets so that you can be reliable, and you can maintain that trusting relationship where you're actually able to deliver. I remember we had some sets, companies that we've dispensed with just because they didn't provide access. But I think you bring up a lot of things that I'm really interested in. One of them is, as you look around and you see, different companies have different models with like direct versus distributors, and some of them, want to close it down. Some of them are actually starting to open it up now. What do you see? There's obviously pluses and minuses, but where do you see things going in that space?
From the industry side, so this is the reason why these things I think are going to go this way is one, commoditization, right? Back when we first started working together, there were really 5 companies that had quality products. Now there's 250 companies that make a pedicle screw. So largely, there's not a huge difference between the companies and their products. So they're kind of valued a little less, honestly. And the hospitals have lowered the price so much. I mean, it's almost lowered 60% since I started working with you, the price of the goods. And so they have to turn over those sets more. So it's going to cost, $80,000 to make one instrument set. They know that they need to turn that instrument set X amount of times a month, or have implants go through that X amount of times a month to justify the cost of that. Well, now you have to, 3X that for what it was to make up for that because of the price decrease. So there's less sets available to run a case. So I think where I see it going is that we start moving away from W-2 in some markets. Colorado is obviously a tougher market. It's a lot of private practice. Physicians still have a lot of say, even though it doesn't probably feel like that sometimes, on what they want to use.
Yeah.
So it's hard for like a company to say, hey, we want, if you're a tech or Nuvasive or whatever, you say, hey, I want this surgeon. We'll work with you, but we want the surgeon to use all this. And you're like, what if they don't like that?
Yeah.
They have the option of having other choices. So I think from a rep perspective, the benefit is moving your mindset from being a W-2 employed rep for a company just waving one flag to becoming a broker for a surgeon, to where it says, hey, what if for this patient and this procedure, you can choose, this company's interbody, this company's screws, this company's biologic, and really customize the surgery per patient based on what...
Rather than just use, all of Medtronic's stuff or all of Globus's stuff, which is obviously what they'd like, but we've kind of personalized everything. So there's also a move, and I want to get your take on this, as outpatient volume is shifting, as cost constraints continue to go down that road along the implant side. Do you see the stock and bill piece potentially playing out at some point where there's less and less of a role for implant reps?
So in certain situations, so big surgery centers, I think there's a really interesting model that I would be interested in trying out, where you contract with one of the smaller companies that has a lot of that runs lean at the top and has a lot of sets. So they're like, hey, we're not going to have 5 layers of management above the person covering the case. We're going to have 3 layers of management. The rest of that revenue we're going to dump into building sets. And then let's say you take a set and you say, hey, this can live at this surgery center. Like, this can live at this surgery center. It's a simple case. The rep that's going to be there is going to train your best scrub tech to be able to restock these and ultimately run the simple cases. I'm talking like 1-level ACDF, 2-level ACDF, even if it's just an instrumented screw case.
Yeah.
The rep should go to the company. I would say the 1099 distributor should go to the company and say, hey, I'll make less on this, but I want to make a little bit on it. But let's say, like, instead of making 30% commission, you're going to cut me down to where I only make 10% commission. Great. And then they also say, but in return for that, I want you to lower your price for your product a significant amount so we can save the facility money.
Yeah.
We can lower the without hurting the ultimate price point of the product, because you're lowering the commission, obviously, of the rep. Then is what that rep would do is they would take that 10% commission they're going to make, and they're going to say, hey, I'm going to pay this scrub tech a consulting fee. Let's say I'm going to pay him an extra $50,000 a year from that 10% to be a consultant for me and help me run this facility. And then at that point, I would have that rep or that distributor contract directly with the facility and take half of what they're saving. So pay me a consulting fee of half of what I'm paying.
You think there's some creative models out there?
I think there's a ton that you could do.
I mean, the thing that's a little wild is that surgery centers don't, at least here in Colorado, I don't know elsewhere, but they don't get to mark up the implants the way that hospitals do. Hospitals look at, orthopedic and spinal implants as, I've heard the term hospital crack, which is like they can charge us massive multiple on these implants. And what other industry are you able to buy a product from someone else, mark it up a multiple, and expect a multiple? The implant company's making theirs, but the hospital may get a multiple on that for not doing any of that. They're just facilitating the surgery. It's basically free money. And sure, they work it into their pro forma or whatever and their cost constraints. But surgery centers don't get to do that. They might get to mark it up maybe 2, 3, 4% or something like that. They're not getting like an actual multiple on the product. Which
you're seeing like
in
a
the past,
multiple.
In the past, I'll tell you, 10 years ago, the hospital might have been getting 10x, 10, 15x.
Well, now they have 5x the amount of administrators in that hospital, so you got to figure out where to pay somewhere.
Well, these are all cost issues with healthcare, but put that in the context of our earlier conversation, where Medicare and commercial payers are paying the actual surgeons less, and then you've got implant companies, you've got hospitals that are charging multiples on implants, and I mean, we may do a surgery at a facility, and the hospital might get paid. I mean, the reality is, the surgeon, let's say the surgeon gets paid $5,000 for the surgery. The hospital might get paid $150. The implant company might get paid $30.
Jeez.
It's crazy.
And then what does the patient get billed?
Who knows? I mean, it's nuts.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, at the end of the day, I mean, I think one thing that's crazy to me, not to bring it back to the surgeon, but I am the surgeon, the amount of the healthcare dollar that actually ends up going to the physician is like nominal in the whole context of everything. So cutting there has the lowest impact on cost savings, but the highest impact on job satisfaction, quality of care, things like that. I mean, we're forced to produce more. Just like your mentor said, hey, you're going to be asked to do more for less. And so in my career right now, what I'm trying to do is figure out how not to be, I don't want to change the end. I've experimented with how much is feasible, and now I need to figure out how to optimize the other variables and not just try to push that number up, because we want to be providing really high quality care and providing it for people, and in scenarios where we're going to get compensated for it.
So as a surgeon, so first you identify, I assume, as a family man, right?
Yeah.
So I
take neurosurgery seriously, but I am a father and a husband before I'm a doctor, for sure.
So what do you do? What have you done to be able to set yourself up to where you can still effectively be a father, husband,
it's a battle every day,
and surgeon?
Yeah, it's a battle every day. I honestly, we tend to think we can juggle a lot of balls, and I've gotten really good at that. But it's, I think it's a farce. There's no such thing. I mean, you only have so many hours in the day, and if you're not fully present, then you're not fully present. People feel it. And just because you showed up doesn't mean you were fully present. Just because you showed up doesn't mean people were knew that you were going to show up. And so that's something I'm trying to change, make big changes, because I think, my situation is a little odd just because of the quadruplet thing. I've got 2 more sons, so I've got 6 boys. They're all boys. And, that's probably caused me to shift how I've worked and try to provide for them, et cetera. But, I want to be there for them. And ultimately my satisfaction and happiness in life is more dependent upon my relationships at home. And if you're spending all this time away from home, just trying to race home, you're just trying to do too much in too little time, and no one's happy about that.
Yeah, no, it's some serious challenges. So coming up into this next year, what is something that you're doing to make that balance? I'm not even saying more, I'm not even saying perfect or imbalance, but to slide the scale a little bit or make it a little easier on the family life.
Well, honestly, I think there is, in the past, I've just been willing to work, whatever was on my schedule, I've just been willing to just work until it was done, and no cutoff time. We might start at 7 a.m. and if it takes us till 10 or 11 p.m., then we'll stop at 10 or 11 p.m. What other job would you do that in? And why would we do that in surgery? Do you really want your surgeon starting a case at 6 p.m.? No. And maybe that's my fault or my office's fault for scheduling too much in one day, but maybe it's not. Maybe it has to do with some other constraint in the hospital that's totally out of my control. And oftentimes it's a combination of many things. And so I've just decided that, listen, I'm not going to operate past 5 p.m., 6 at the latest. I'm not going to do that anymore. I just it's got to be an off switch. And, I've always felt like I can never cancel a case. So I need to be more cognizant of, making sure we don't overschedule stuff. But if the hospital has no concern whether or not I'm going to keep working, they don't really care. So I've kind of created part of the problem, to be honest. And I think that's part of the culture of medicine, culture of surgery too.
That's interesting. Yeah. No, I could definitely see that. To kind of go back, you'd mentioned before, we hadn't really talked about this. You mentioned, using NuVasive and Medtronic and whatever. How'd you choose? I mean, like in your mind, obviously this is kind of a slided question because I'm the rep asking you about reps. Like, do you see a difference between W-2 reps and distributors?
I think so. I mean, I haven't worked with the W-2 rep for a long time, to be fair, but I think,
or even if it's a W-2 versus distributor model in the perspective of the surgeon.
I just think, I mean, when I know that you don't have a bias toward a product that is outside of, that doesn't benefit me or my interests or my preferences. I never feel like you're pushing a product. You're just offering new solutions. And if we want to change, then, maybe a few points this way or that way, but it's never really a big deal. It's like, oh, well, we just want to have good products, and we cycle through a lot of different stuff. And sometimes we cycle through stuff because industry forces it. And the reality is, you're right. There's a lot of products out there that are very, very similar. You can wear the T-shirt, I guess, but doesn't mean, they own you. Doesn't mean that they own your business. Turn the lease in and go get a new car. I mean, there's other products out there, and these companies need to know that if they need to have more than just a good product to keep your business. And honestly, I think a lot of that comes down to, this is what's fascinated me about medical device sales, is really about relationships. There's not a lot of like businesses where, a sales representative, distributor is working that closely with the consumer of the product. And the thing is when even though I'm the consumer, I'm actually not the one paying for the product, right? So it's just a really unusual scenario. I'm not actually paying for it. I'm just using it.
So it's kind of like, it's almost like the consumer and the customer are very different. Like how many products do you, it's pretty, and sometimes you do it where you're like, hey, Chandler, check out this new product. Like, but for the most part, I would say it's usually like you're the consumer. And for the most part, I would say usually the distributor or the rep is actually the customer, because there's, how many unread pamphlets of whatever product or widget end up on your desk that you just kind of throw away, you know? It's an interesting like kind of shift now that, again, when it was only 5 companies, there's a lot less noise.
Yeah.
So, a new pedicle screw from NuVasive, that made big news. Now there's a new pedicle screw that comes out probably every other week at this point. And you're never most likely going to hear about it unless it's through like myself or one of our reps.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that you mentioned that.
So why would we change products? I mean, honestly, so I want you to be successful, and we're friends, and I want you do a lot for me. I want you to be successful. I want you to be using products that make sense for your business too. I think the only constraints we've run into on some of that stuff is that not all products are available at every facility. So that's complicated sometimes, right?
Contracting, yeah.
Contracting gets in the way.
That's the other issue with W-2 as well. If you're locked out of a facility and you go to another facility, and I can only carry Medtronic or NuVasive or ATEC or something like that, and they're not on that contract, guess what? Like,
you're in trouble.
Yeah, you're in trouble. Like the person that you call for all your surgeries up until that point can't do anything.
And the reality is, if you have nothing else to offer that surgeon but what's in that bag, they don't really have a lot of skin, and they don't want anything else. They don't really have a lot of skin. You have more leverage as a distributor to help me and to incentivize me to help you to onboard a product or to get a product on contract. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because you have other products that you're already supporting me in and that we want. And if you're like, hey, well, we want to get this product on, this would help me. This is a great product for you. Maybe you'd like to try it out. But if you're like locked into Stryker or locked into NuVasive and they're not on contract, but you can't go grab items or you don't have anything else to offer, I think those reps they're kind of stuck.
Yeah. No, I
don't know how the direct model persists. I think we've had this conversation, it's probably only around because companies like to show that they've got a direct sales force because it improves their valuation. So it's all about a company liquidating its assets and finding a buyer. Because if their sales are tied to distributors, then they have quote unquote less control over that volume, and they can't rely on it, presumably.
Yeah, no, I heard the exact same thing. How do you choose? Like, what would make you move off a product? What would make you change from doing one product to another?
I mean, if I'm having technically, I don't like the engineering of it. If I don't like how the product works, I mean, those are very simple things. Most products are pretty good. But there's some screw interfaces that, I don't like. They're not as reliable. Some sets have better, kind of like ancillary systems, the reduction towers and things like that can make it, nicer, easier to use. If a set wasn't available, of course, we wouldn't reliably use it. If it didn't, just meet the technical specs that I wanted, then I wouldn't use it. But I mean, poster cervical is a really good example. I mean, there's not a tremendous amount of variety in that set. You basically have a hand drill and a screw, maybe a tap. I mean, 3/5 rod and a rod bender. The only thing that can differentiate one of those sets, have some of these offsetting things or, multi-variable angle, screw heads that are nice, but those are a little bit one-off and less commonly used. And so, if you've got a good reduction tower, then maybe that's the only reason you use a set. But that might not be a reason to stay with someone.
Yeah. Would you, and that's something that's interesting is like in the last, I would even say like year or two, I've had more candid conversations with surgeons where they're starting to notice the super ability of availability, right? Like I feel like now with again, the price of implants coming down and the squeeze on how many sets and instrument sets are available, that's something that you guys are actually having to like factor into things is, oh, I have to do a fenestrated screw case. I wonder if the sets will even be here. I wonder how hard it's going to get those sets. I've had more of those conversations with surgeons in the last couple of years and not that we weren't able to deliver them, but to like just the offhand conversations of they actually ask that. They're like, hey, are fenestrated sets available? To where they're starting to notice that availability is going to be a very big issue in the next few years of whatever rep you pick has to be able to deliver sets reliably.
So why can't a rep sometimes not deliver the sets?
So it's a great question. So these companies want predictability, like you said, right? Some type of control. And so if company A is like, hey, we have a rep, we have a distributor that does $1 million worth of business with us, with our screws. They're going to leave. They're going to say, hey, we'll allocate X
so you have
amount
to
of
have volume
sets.
to get volume.
Correct. And so like they'll say, hey, we'll allocate.
So the bigger distributorships are going to get bigger.
Correct.
It's going to be harder to start small distributorships.
100%. The Lone Rangers, I would say my advice to the Lone Rangers is unless you're converting over, like if you're converting over one doctor, either you should probably try to get an ortho spine guy because they're not going to take as much trauma call, most likely, spine trauma call. So you're not going to be stuck in a position where it's like, hey, I have to have this random set. Whereas like we cover a lot of neurosurgery trauma call, obviously, and thank goodness we're large enough to where we can have multiple sets live on every shelf wherever the trauma call is going, and still even off our elective business get turns on those sets. Whereas if you're a onesie twosie guy or you're like a distributor that leaves and takes one neuro guy with them but doesn't have all the elective business or enough elective business for them to justify holding that company's sets in town, they're going to get a call at 11 o'clock at night. hey, I got a posterior cervical I need done. I need to do a posterior cervical in the next 3 hours. Do you have a set? And they're gonna be like, nah, I don't. Like,
Yeah.
And that can happen to anyone, don't get me wrong, but that's the way to guard against it. As a surgeon, you're going to have to, in the next year, 2 years, they're going to have to really look at what their preference is and who their rep is in terms of how healthy
So, I
is
mean,
their
are you
business.
scared? So here, are you, like, honestly, I mean, I've had that experience where, you know, I would just use another set. And I know as a rep, I think you would I could guess that you were probably really stressed to not be able to support that case. Like, there's the assumption for you that I have to support all the business or I'm going to lose all the business, right? Maybe.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. So especially when you're newer into it, right? So if it happened to you once every 5 years where you have to give away a case, once every 2 years.
I mean, once every two, that's still like pretty one-off. Man.
It is. It's pretty one-off.
That's a tight record to have to stick to.
Even 1 out of every 2 years. It's a tight, it's like a.
Is that realistic though? I mean, do you think that anxiety is real?
Oh, it's very. Like
there's a chance.
If it's not, you're a salaried rep. You're a W-2.
All right, so that's just the hunger.
That's the hunger, yeah.
Of the distributor.
And that's what the whole reason of being a distributor is. Like, not only do I get to pick the best products, but I get to pick the best situations with the best products.
Yeah.
So like a company that has good products. So if a company's products are, 10 out of 10, the best products in the world, but they only have a limited number of sets, so you can never get them, doesn't matter. You're not going to use them. If a different company has, like, let's say 8 out of 10 on the technology side, but they have an immense amount of sets and they commit to putting those sets in your market with you, then that's what I'm going to choose.
So here's a question. So there's a lot of good companies out there that have great implants, but I mean, every company, they're sitting around and they're like, okay, we got to complete our bag, right? So every bag has got, they got the screws, they got the rods, they got, cages, maybe some titanium cages, maybe some 3D printed. And then, everyone's got to have their bio, right? So everyone's got, whether some, synthetic, maybe a cortical fiber, maybe, some other stem product or whatever. So, you're using, X type of screw and that company's like, hey, would you be interested in pushing our bio also? How do you decide what you're going to introduce to the surgeon? Let's say you're repping me right now 10, 15 products, and every one of those companies has their own bio. How do you decide which one you're going to introduce to me?
A big thing is contracts, for sure.
What's available at the hospital?
What's available at the hospital? What can you get on contract?
Okay.
That's one of them. The other thing too is, like, you got to figure in most of our cases, your pedicle screw company is different than your interbody company. Both of those are different than your bio company.
Yeah. Is that odd? Is that
it's becoming more and more common.
So a lot of surgeons are like that?
It's becoming more and more common, especially in private practice.
Is that a consequence of the direct versus the distributor model?
I think so.
It has to be distributors, right? Because direct people would never do that.
Well, there's some direct that will play in that gray area, but they usually will run it through distributors. They'll say, like, hey, give me a percentage of this.
So this is a controversial space, right? So when you're a direct distributor, you are dedicated to only repping one product.
So there's 3 different types. There's W-2, right?
Yeah, W-2.
Then there's direct, or like they'll call them exclusive or dedicated distributors.
Okay.
Where they're basically W-2, but they're 1099 that only sell one company.
And they've got basically an exclusive to only sell Synthes or whatever, right?
Yeah. And then you have the true distributors, in my mind, are the ones that are like, hey, I'm not going to sign a non-compete for this. I'm going to be the broker for the surgeon, and we'll use 5 different companies in a given surgery.
So I got two questions. One, there are some people in that direct space that are operating outside their non-competes.
Correct.
What percentage of direct distributors would you guess are doing that?
Direct distributors or W-2?
I don't know, but like
I don't know. It's so regional too. It's either regional or it's by company, because there are a lot of companies where the direct guys
don't really care.
Where they're like, so there's a lot of companies that are seeing the shift, and so they'll turn a blind eye to it.
Okay.
Right. But it just goes based on situation, area. I mean, in Denver, there's a lot. So
what percentage of those people are doing something on the side outside of their? Would you guess?
Like
50%?
I would say 50%.
Okay, that's intense. So, here's another question. So, obviously, companies, the presumption is that they all want their sales force to be direct. But can you think of a scenario where it actually hurts their volume to have where they're trying to force you to go direct or force you to go exclusive? And why would a company want to force you to try to go exclusive if it's going to hurt their volume? I mean, to the tune of 7 figures, maybe 8 figures of revenue. That they could easily do that.
For sure. We've had that happen.
Seems nonsense,
but
right?
You're making an assumption that volume is what they're after.
Okay.
So if they're trying to position themselves to get sold, just like what you'd said before, they want to show the market that they have an exclusive distributor sales force or an exclusive sales force, whether it's exclusive.
Does that ever happen to you?
Or W2? Oh, absolutely. Yeah. We have a company that we had a company that we were the largest volume and really the only organic volume outside of their paid surgeons. Where we actually went and got surgeons off the merit of their products and off the merit of our relationship with the surgeons is really what it was. Got them into hospitals, got them on contract, and then we refused to sign a non-compete or be exclusive with them, but we still committed to growing 80% year over year. And they came to us and like, we got to sign a non-compete, and we're like, we're just not.
So how much volume did you do, let's say, with that company 1.5, 2 years ago?
So probably about. So like 1.5, 2 years ago.
I don't know, whatever.
When they cut us or when?
Before they cut you.
So right before they cut us, we were on track to do about 1.7 million. And we were trending towards, probably this year, we would have probably done about 2.5, 3 million.
Okay. So now how much of their volume do they have now?
All of that went away.
So zero.
And so yeah, in the total area, they probably had maybe $4 million worth of business. And we were close to half of it, third half of it.
Who's making those decisions?
Honestly, it's kind of like Congress, right? Like if you're going to try to cut expenses in the U.S., the best way to do it would be cut spending. But the people that their salaries based on spending are the ones who decide if that was a way to cut spending. Same thing in the med device companies. These med device companies will have multiple layers of management, and those multiple layers of management, they are a huge expense, but they'll look at every other expense to try to cut. So if they are upset that, they're not getting, it's not about what they do get, it's what they're not getting. So if they're upset that, let's say we're doing $6 million in a year and they're only getting $2 million of it, they're going to be upset they're not getting that other $4 million. And so what they'll do is sometimes they'll bank on, all right, well, we'll pull your contract. And the surgeons will be so heartbroken that they're not able to use our pedicle screw or our novel, they're going to shift
porous titanium. They're going to shift reps.
They're going to stay, and we're going to put a new rep.
How often does that happen when they pull the contract and the surgeon stays with them?
Less and less, because again, there's so many more options. It's hard to really have something unique. I would say the relationship between the rep and the surgeon is more unique than the product the surgeon's using.
Yeah, I mean, most things in life are based on relationships.
Yeah. There's not only 5 companies out there anymore, It's kind of one of those things of like, you'll go and look at a product and be like, yeah, that's pretty. Not that pretty.
Yeah.
So that, I don't know. I mean, as a surgeon, it's, you've shifted better than anyone in like being able to like, a pedicle screw in your hands is going to have the same outcome.
I think
no matter what it is. So it's really the biggest, there are a few differentiators, right? Disc replacement.
Yep.
There's not very many disc replacement companies. They have more control.
Yep.
There'll be more, but outside of that, maybe some bio, like there's, infuse and therapeutics. But outside of that, there's not really a big differentiator between the products in my mind.
Some of the expandable cages, but you got to really be into that. Maybe the endoscopic space is going to have some unique stuff there. There's some niche products out there, of course, but the general like full complement spine companies, I think there's not a lot of differentiators.
In your mind, so kind of quick in your mind, where have spine manufacturers failed? Where have spine manufacturers failed the surgeon?
Wow. I mean, I don't know that they're ever serving the surgeon. I think they're just, just like any industry, I think, the pendulum always seems to be swinging into a new and exciting conversation. Sales is always some combination of something that is novel and something that's familiar, right? So you got a screw, but it's like a shinier screw, and it's got, HA coated, or you've got a cage, and now this is 3D printed, and it's got, micropore technology, and the surgeon likes it, but he hates it because he can't see anything on his CT scans, I mean, if you look at technology in spine, because the reimbursements have been so high, it's stifled a lot of innovation, I would say. I mean, you have to go create another product that is going to compete with, a pedicle screw that's selling for, I don't know, at one point, over $1,000 a piece, and might have cost, I don't know, $15 to make or something. Who knows? It's hard to compete with those kind of margins. And so there's not just like pharma, there's not a lot of incentive to innovate. I mean, the areas that there's opportunities to innovate are, I think, in the motion preservation space, but there's just a lot of complexity about that. So I don't know that, I don't know they've actually failed me. I just think that it's the industry, and.
Do you think they've plateaued?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's why pricing is either static or going down. You can still get new products with a premium, right? I mean, there's still products coming out that hospitals are willing to pay a premium on, but I mean, it's like the old routine of like what they would do is they'd come in and they'd say, hey, this is a standalone A-lift product, right? And they'd say, it's going to cost $5,000. And they would comp it to an anterior cage, plate, and pedicle screw and rod construct, and they would charge the same price, right? Yeah. And you're like, okay, but I'm still going to use pedicle screws, and I'm only going to put in one screw in the front, and I'm not going to use it as a standalone, and it's not going to save you any money. In fact, it's going to cost you more. So that's been kind of silly how that's worked out, but I'm not surprised that reimbursement for implants is going down. I don't know where it's going to go. I think that middle management will probably vaporize.
It should. I mean, what we see, is what my worry would be is that the first thing that'll fall are reps. Not that they're not going to have reps, but their quality of reps are going to go down. I mean, we've committed to hiring younger reps, right? And we spend a lot in training them and getting them up and running, just because we know that the older reps that are making, $300,000-$400,000 are probably going to not be so excited to make what they're going to make as the pricing continues to erode.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, if they're not getting higher reimbursement rates as a distributor, if they're going direct. I mean, the differential between a direct rep and a distributor could be like 6% versus 35%, right?
Yeah.
Or more.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, to those companies that work with distributors, it's not necessarily a bad model because they're offloading all the costs on that as well. There's no benefits, there's no salary, there's no car stipend, there's no expense account. It's all kind of pushed onto the distributor, to where I think that's where it's ultimately going to go, is that I think I'm better at managing the microeconomy of our business than Medtronic would be.
Do you ever see a model where you have distributors that are becoming implant companies, where they've created these relationships and then they are, labeling products for, Medtronic or whatever. And, I don't know what you would call that.
So they
putting a generic label on it and then selling that product as
white labeling,
as their white label product.
Yeah. So they'll white label. There's companies that'll even do that. There's a really brilliant distributor called New Age Medical. Awesome model. They actually will go in. So like when you have the hospital constrained accounts, maybe the hospital's like, hey, we're going to cut down to 5 vendors, and they'll have Medtronic, NuVasive, DePuy, Stryker, and then they'll have New Age Medical. And it's actually a really cool model because what they'll do is they'll allow New Age Medical has 30 companies they work with, but that hospital only counts them as one vendor. So the surgeons can still get the products they want from all those companies, and the hospital still is meeting their objective of decreasing the amount of vendors. And in that case, they actually, and I don't know 100% how it works, but in some cases I know that the distributor can buy the hardware directly from the company and then have their own SKU numbers and sell it to the hospital. And
through New Age Medical?
Correct, through New Age Medical or through their...
So it's just a bypass of the contracting.
Correct.
The limited number of vendor contracting.
Yeah.
Which we understand why hospitals do that. It decreases some complexity and stuff, and then they have more control, right? Kind
of, I guess. I mean, honestly, the reason they do that is just to lower the prices. They're like, hey, we're going to do a RFP, a request for, what is the P on that? Request for proposal. Yeah, we're going to do an RFP, a request for proposal. And so basically it's just them shaking down the implant companies every few years. And they're like, hey, it's 3 years. 3 years of your contract are up. You guys all have to bid to try to get on this. Give us your lowest price. And so they keep undercutting themselves until it's like down to a point where people are like as a rep, there are accounts I won't go cover cases in. That I'm like, it's not worth going and covering a case.
Wow.
Like, am I going to go spend, am I going to go to the local community hospital and spend 5 hours between setup and cleanup and covering the case to make $50 on a single level ACDF because the pricing's so low? No. There's way better time spent doing other things. So, yeah, I don't know. Yeah. So kind of in closing, what are you excited about for the future in your practice?
I'm excited about, I think, there's a lot to be excited about. Even though there's a lot of doom and gloom but I think as, I'm just continue to mature and hone in on the areas of interest that I'm focused on. And I'm excited to just really provide those niche areas of care, which is artificial disc, minimally invasive surgery, some regenerative components to my spine practice, and really just find a happy medium where, I'm not just trying to churn out cases and trying to do more, but trying to provide the best care for the right patients under the right circumstances. Not that I haven't been doing that, but I think as you just, migrate through different stages of your career, get a little more comfortable making modifications and where you're putting your energy, and make sure to reevaluate what things you're doing that are, not necessarily productive or rewarding. So just I'm happy to be, focusing on those things and making changes in my practice and really honing in on, growing, developing an outpatient spine practice.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I'm excited to grow that with you. Last thing. What is a we're sitting obviously in a studio doing Back and Brew. This is also where we film a lot of your content with Dark Water Consulting.
Yeah.
How has that experience been in being able to utilize like a state-of-the-art marketing company that's specifically designed for spine?
It's funny because like on Instagram, you get there's all these little ads that I get now about, marketing this and give me these patients. And I'm like, this is so silly. What I've appreciated most about Dark Water is that it's not just about the sets. It's not just about the quality of the filming, the audio, the lighting, the editing, which, those are baseline requirements that nobody else is actually providing in the space, to be totally fair. So that's kudos to Dark Water. But I think just having the conversation around, what content is relevant. The medical space and the surgical space is unique, and the audience is unique, and being able to, have a conversation with the team while we're taping or prepping to tape and what we're going to talk about. That I would say is probably the most stressful part as the surgeon producing the content. And you guys make it really easy. And, there's, for anybody that's interested in getting into producing content, you go through these waves of like, well, what's the right content? What's the message I want to put out? How much? Is it a volume play? I mean, there's just so many things. One thing's for sure, you don't want to produce content that doesn't look professional, that doesn't have a medical, surgical touch to it. And I think that's, very, very unique to Darkwater. So I think you guys understand the space. It's not like, oh, hey, we're doing marketing for, retailers, and we're now going to jump into healthcare niche, surgical subspecialty marketing in a topic that is we don't understand anything about. There's a lot of nuance to healthcare, and it's clear that the whole Darkwater team is dialed into that and comfortable with it and familiar with it. So I think it makes a huge difference.
Have you noticed a difference in the patients that you get from the Darkwater leads?
Absolutely. I mean, patients, part of it is just where they're coming from, how they find me, and when they find the website that Darkwater's helped create, they're coming to me they're coming to me of their own volition rather than being referred. And that it may seem like a referral from another doctor is better, but I've found that a self-referral is always the best referral. So a patient that finds you through your website, even if they've been referred through another doctor, it doesn't even matter. If they're contacting me directly through the website, even if another doctor sent them, that's always a better interaction because they've initiated it. If you fill out a form and ask somebody to call you, and when they call you, usually you're happy to hear from them because you're waiting for that call. On the other hand, if someone else is like got your information through some backdoor referral, and then you call and you're like, oh, hey, who is this? What's this about? I just find that the patients that are coming to me through the marketing program that we've developed and through the patient capture on the website, those patients are much more excited to advance their care, engaged in the conversation, and they're grateful to receive a phone call. And they're it's just totally different.
Do you call them every time personally?
I try to, yeah. I may not get a hold of them every time because sometimes you get a voicemail, but I'll leave them a message, leave them my cell phone number. Sometimes they're scared to call me back. They sometimes will text me, but what I'll typically do is leave them a message if I don't get a hold of them. And sometimes I'll try them a couple times, but I'll also pass their info along to my office and make sure that we're at least, connecting the dots. And so I don't want to lose just because I missed them. I don't want to lose contact with them.
Awesome. All right. Well, man, thanks for coming on. Appreciate it.
Yep, absolutely.
Sure, I'll see
we'll
you
do it
later
again
this week. Hopefully I don't see you too late on
That's right.
any of these.
Not after 5 p.m. anymore. Yeah. It's not going to happen. Not unless I'm on call.
My wife is all for that.
Did you tell her about it?
I did. After we had that 1 a.m. After we had that 1 a.m. case.
What was that?
Like right before Christmas, maybe right after. Remember we did the 1 a.m. perk screw case, and I'm like, good news.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a bad day. I think I was leaving the country.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
That was bad. What's exciting about Darkwater? What's happening this year?
I'm really excited about some of the content we're going to create. We've gone into multiple other states. We're on both coasts, in the Midwest, in the South. I'm really excited for some of the new content we're coming out with. Darkwater produces this podcast, Back and Brew, a spine conversation over a brew of choice. And I'm excited to partner with private practice surgeons. That's really what the Darkwater mission is how do we empower private practice surgeons in a market and an industry that is actively pushing against them. And that's what excites me about it, being able to help you specialize in endoscopic and regenerative medicine, as well as continue to advance the motion preservation part of your practice. And then also going into other states. We have some awesome surgeons we work with in Ohio, Dallas, California, Massachusetts, Hawaii. We're looking at right now.
Cool.
I'm excited to just be able to give private practice surgeons a voice and advance kind of the advocacy of personalized, customized care that goes with private practice.
Yeah, making their statement. Cool.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on. Thanks for bringing on some Rocky Mountain Soda Company root beer.
Yeah, it was actually pretty good. I've almost finished it. So
awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to being able to have more conversations and make some more content.
Great. Awesome. Thanks, Chandler.
Thank you.